SNHell, a look back at Saturday Night Live with your hosts, Matt and Keith. Brought to you by Lions Den Audio Theater. Like and subscribe to Lions Den Audio Theater for more Lions Den goodness. And here are your hosts, Keith and Matt.
Saturday Night Live Season 4, Episode 14, starring Gary Busey, originally aired on March 3rd, 1979. Hello and welcome to SNHell. My name is Keith. With me as always, my good buddy Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Keith. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm very curious to see Gary Busey. Wild card.
The wildest of cards, yeah. Yes, Busey joining us tonight. Also joining us tonight is our third chair. Haven't heard from him in a little while, but it's Chili. Hello, Chili.
Piss on the Yankees, piss on the Indians. No, very happy to be here. Big Gary Busey fan. Let's see how he does.
Yes, absolutely. So, let's just talk about Gary Busey for a second. This could be a long episode if I'm not smart. Gary Busey, actor, musician, multiple other things. Well, let's just, if you first came across Gary Busey at this point in time, 1979, you'd know him as this young up-and-comer, an actor, fresh off his turn as Buddy Holly in the Oscar-nominated role as Buddy Holly in the Buddy Holly Story. If you're like me and you came across Gary Busey in the mid-'80s, you'd know him for his prolific work and a lot of really memorable supporting roles in films like Point Break, Predator 2, The Firm, Under Siege, Lethal Weapon, a whole lot of directed VHS releases as well. And folks who first came across Gary Busey in the late 90s know him as most likely the most entertaining thing on reality television, having been on Dancing with the Stars, Celebrity Big Brother, The Apprentice, and later Pet Justice, and I'm with Busey. Busey is an eccentric guy. He was a survivor of a horrific motorcycle accident where he wasn't wearing a helmet, a brain injury in 1988 that almost killed him. He actually says it did kill him. He then went on to have a very serious overdose. After that time, he's really gone on to promote like spirituality, self-reliance, clean living. You know, in the big list of unique people with unique lives in Hollywood, there are not many who are up there with Gary Busey. For me, in like 93, 94, I started collecting Gary Busey movies and just getting them from video stores and illegally dubbing them or illegally copying them and keeping them in a collection. I think I had over 50 at one point. This is pre-internet, too. It's like while other actors might be, you know, better actors, I don't think I've found anyone more fascinating in his choices, performances than Gary Busey himself. So much like Matt with Frank Zappa earlier in the year, this is kind of my, I guess, special treat for tonight. Chili, Matt, talk about Gary Busey as you know him.
Big fan of a lot of his stuff. You know, Silver Bullet's one that always jumps out to me. And also, it should be noted that of all the celebrities out there, I probably look the most like Gary Busey. So, you know, for all the people out there who've been hearing my dulcet tones all these years, just picture it coming from, you know, about a mid to late 30s Gary Busey, and you kind of have what you're looking at. He was always typically the best thing, even in bad stuff. Sort of like what Keith said with the reality shows. You know, there were lots of, you know, VHS schlock that he was in, but Gary was always entertaining, and he brought a form of intensity to a lot of roles. I am excited to see how he does live here on SNL.
Chili, were you punched in the face or something recently?
Punched in the face?
You have a bit of a lisp tonight.
Could be because I'm talking through my phone and I do have a little bit of a cold. Normally I do this through my laptop, but I got a new laptop, so I couldn't get it connected properly.
Okay. I just wanted to let folks know that some technical glitches make Chili sound a little goofy tonight.
Yeah, I also get another Gary resemblance. I get Gary Oldman, though. Keith, if by the end of the episode you can come up with a celebrity doppelganger, we'll have a complete visual of the show.
Well, while we're on that, Gary Busey during the monologue is dressed exactly how I am every day of my life for the past 25 years. Usually tartan or plaid instead of Hawaiian, but I have that in my collection.
I love Silver Bullet. That's where I first saw Gary Busey.
Yeah.
Silver Bullet's one of my favorite movies. I tried to watch it with my kid recently, and she was like, Dad, this is boring. You have no taste. Your taste is shit. So we hotly disagree about Silver Bullet. But yeah, I was a reality TV guy, and you know, around the turn of the millennium, I watched some tawdry shows. So I've seen him around. I knew he had a brain injury that, and I think I remember my mom saying at some point, like, oh yeah, he's crazy because he was in this accident and he had a major head injury. And then sometimes I see footage like from before the injury, and Gary Busey's just crazy. The accident didn't he may have exacerbated something, but he was already a wild man. I also, when I was a kid, used to confuse him with Nick Nolte.
Yes, that's quite common. Yeah, we used to have people would tell me that Gary Busey was in like Down and Out in Beverly Hills, and I'd rent it, and it turned out to be Nick Nolte. It was very frustrating for a collector.
Nick Nolte's like a boring Gary Busey.
They were often considered to be the two wildest party men in and around Hollywood. Busey.
I can't think of a single Nick Nolte thing I find interesting.
The remake of Cape Fear, I enjoyed.
Okay, you know what? I didn't see that, so that's fair.
I think you'd like it. So, true to his reputation, Gary Busey disappeared a few minutes before they went to air. They found him less than a minute before air. He was all kind of worked up and ready to go. But I think he was under the bleachers or out by a pop machine or something. Either way, they got him in and on the air. Musical guests tonight is kind of a hodgepodge tonight. We have Eubie Blake and Gregory Hines perform together. And then Rick Danko and Paul Butterfield perform with Gary Busey later in the show. Interesting to note with Eubie Blake, he was 92 years old at this point in time, which makes him the oldest person to have a sort of featured spot on Saturday Night Live to this day. Betty White was about 8 years younger, I think, when she hosted. So let's jump right into the cold open. Gary Busey is backstage at the lockers. He's with Jane and Lorraine as Garrett passes by with a white horse. Busey tells Jane that he wanted to knock John Belushi's teeth out because he won't talk to him. Jane says, don't worry about it. She'd give anything to have John Belushi not talk to her. Jane actually explains further that Belushi is mad that Gary Busey has a nomination for an Oscar and that Belushi didn't, and Belushi sees Busey's nomination as his. She explains it better by saying the other four nominees have reasons why they're nominated. Laurence Olivier is going to die soon, and they don't want another Peter Finch incident. Finch was the star of Network who died and got a posthumous Oscar. Jon Voight and Robert De Niro are nominated for their bodies of work. And Warren Beatty slept with the Oscar nominating committee. Jane says it's Belushi's theory, and she can't really explain it. Gary wants to put everything to bed and thinks if he can go sit and chat with John, everything will be cool. Jane says that they're both young, not good-looking actors who really speak to the rock generation, and John sees that as the reason Gary's nomination is his own. And because so many people saw Animal House and nobody saw the Buddy Holly story, John feels he should be getting the nomination. She says the best way to make amends with John is to go ask him for a video clip of Samurai Night Fever. Gary goes to Belushi's dressing room where he's getting prepped by their hangers-on, but it's actually the writers. Belushi sends everyone away so we can talk to Busey, and he says he doesn't care about the Oscars. Busey repeats what Jane says, and John says he's happy, and Gary Busey doesn't seem like such a bad guy, but he is just another lame-o Hollywood actor. He says that movie actors, when the chips are down, show up on TV and have the TV actors bail them out. Belushi mistakenly thinks that Gary Busey did the Buddy Hackett story and nobody saw it, and says, tonight on the show when you do the monologue, be yourself and let everyone know who Jerry Busey really is. Busey wants to know why John Belushi, who is a big star, continues to do this show. Belushi says it's because it's different. It's live from New York, and it's Saturday night. This was very long, and it was kind of chaotic because, Busey was chaotic. He was all over the place, a little bit ad-libbing here and there. And Belushi, too, was kind of off a bit. The Jane part was great. Jane was fantastic. The random horse I laughed at. We find out why it's there a little later. But what's really interesting to me is we kind of have the wild man of film, like the new wild man of film and the new wild man of TV here. And I couldn't help but think like their fates sort of become opposite sides of the same coin. I enjoyed this. I got a few laughs out of it. I do think they're milking the John's a big star a bit too much for my liking, especially like at this point, the hosts are still bigger stars than the stars of the show. But all that being said, maybe just because it was Gary Busey being himself in that time and in that place, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I liked this cold open as well. It was something different. I could actually believe that Gary Busey and John Belushi would have gotten in a fight minutes before the show, just based off of their reputations. Like you said, both wild men. It's weird because normally at this point in time, you'd think they don't feel comfortable. Gary almost felt almost a little too comfortable in a way with how he would throw in little ad libs and jabs here or there. So overall, I enjoyed this. It was a little long.
I really hate when the host is in the cold open. I just think it's a part of the formula that should generally be avoided. I don't think you get that sense of, wow, here's our host. And now having said that, I will contradict myself slightly in that I thought Gary Busey was excellent here, in that he brought that manic energy that he just carries around with him. It just pumped the whole thing full of life. Yes, Jane was good. I know, Keith, you mentioned that you didn't care for it, but I do find the idea of not ready for prime time players just having a few lockers in the back pretty funny. And yeah, Belushi, he was pretty good. They do the Belushi's a big star a lot. And, the idea that Animal House could even be spoken in the same breath as an Oscar should be funny. And it is. Gary Busey's he's a big boy. I was surprised at how big a boy he was when I saw him on screen. I guess I just never really noticed. You can never tell with these people on the TV. I also noticed Lorraine looked tiny this episode. Maybe it's because Busey is such a large man.
Busey is 6 feet tall, I believe.
No, he looks bigger. Like, he looked like such a large, lanky lad.
He looks gigantic, yeah. We're now at the monologue. Gary Busey bounds from the door at the top of the stairs and comes to home base. He cuts off the audience because they just have too much to do tonight, and he can't stand there long enough to let them clap. He says they'd written a funny monologue, but he's not going to do it because John said to do something that's him. So he decides to do the very first performance he ever did, and it was at his church, which is basically a percussion bit where he slaps his legs and chest and makes some vocal noises, and he gets the audience to join in with the clapping. I thought this was strange and short, but again, this is a very Gary Busey thing to do, I think. This is definitely not something a writer put together and said, here, this is what you're going to do. This came out of the mind of Busey. It is not a classic monologue. It's not even really a funny monologue. It's just, this is what we're in store for tonight.
Yeah, it was short, and I would normally, I think, have a bigger issue with this, but the fact that we just saw so much of Busey playing himself in the cold open, I didn't mind having a very short, let's get past this monologue bit. So, yeah, I'm giving this a pass.
Indeed, barely qualifies as a monologue. I don't even. It's almost like this was a monologue-less show. Who was I saying recently? It was like this episode doesn't really have a host.
That was the Rolling Stones and Ricky Nelson.
And I sure as shit laughed at it. I think it was probably my favorite part of the entire episode when he leapt out of that door. That got a really good reaction from me. I'm feeling good right now. I think I'm going to enjoy this. He's a bit of a wild man. And yeah, you're right. Nobody could possibly have written this.
No.
Like, hey, Gary, go out and do this slap thing that you can do. I'm glad it was super short. Kind of like Chili said, we already kind of set him up in the cold open. You don't really need to do too much out here.
We're now off to the White House bedroom. Dan and Lorraine, as Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, are packing for a trip to the Middle East. Jimmy is looking for his yarmulke that Menachem Begin gave him. Rosalind has it with her clothes, but it shrank in the wash. So he's going to bring some extra Camp David ones instead, and they are yarmulkes that have Camp David written on them. Gilda enters as Jimmy's mother, Miss Lillian. She asks Rosalind to go and make some shake and bake so she can talk to Jimmy by herself. Rosalind, before she leaves, warns Jimmy about sitting for a long time, revisiting the hemorrhoid jokes, and Jimmy reveals that he has half a suitcase full of Preparation H. Miss Lillian wants to talk to Jimmy about his brother Billy. She says it hasn't been easy for Billy lately, and he's very proud of his older brother. And after some cajoling from his mother to take his little brother where he's going, Jimmy says that he will. She calls Billy in and he doesn't come in, so she opens a beer can and Busey bounds into the room in a very as a very funny looking Billy Carter. He sheepishly apologizes to Jimmy for the things he said and the places where he's whizzed. Jimmy asks Billy to join him in the Middle East, and as long as he stays on his best behavior. Cut to Bill Murray as Walter Cronkite reporting from Jerusalem. Cronkite says that Menachem Begin gave them a tour where security is tighter because Billy came along, and they put a huge tarpaulin over the Wailing Wall, and it turned out not to be needed. Belushi then plays Begin, and he has more of a Yiddish accent than anything else. And Garrett plays Anwar Sadat. They're at a state dinner where Begin and Sadat address the crowd. Sadat toasts the Nobel Peace Prize and it hopes for another one so they can get 2 in a row. We see Billy in a tux with his fishing hat still on, taking a drink during the toasts. When Jimmy is announced to come to the podium, Billy hoots and hollers, raises Jimmy's hands. Jimmy mentions that the U.S. government will pay the cost of a dirty suit that was caused by Billy. Bagan then takes the podium again and refers to his own brother-in-law named Avram, who is called a putz and who reminds Bagan of Billy. This was a funny idea, and putting Busey as Billy Carter was a stroke of genius. Aykroyd, Lorraine, Gilda, Murray were all good as their Carters and Cronkite. Usual goodness there. Busey's amused randomness worked really well here. He's just making noises and clapping and hooting at the table. Some good performances in here. From a structural point of view, though, I kind of wish that there could have been more of like an obvious bit about Sadat. The sketch might have been helped if Sadat and Bagan both had their own Billies in their lives, and that's why peace came about. There was something where the structure fell apart in the second bit. Kind of hoping for maybe like this sort of Forrest Gump effect where Billy caused peace to be reached for somehow or other.
Got to agree. Good use of good use of Busey and sort of his randomness. Like, it's the type of thing that your drunk, embarrassing brother would do, randomly hoot and holler. And I got a really good laugh out of him still having the fishing cap on at fancy dinner. And I got to echo what you said too. I was expecting Billy's presence to have more of an impact on actually creating peace, or perhaps sending them back into war. It just sort of felt like the second half of the sketch needed a bit more work.
Outside of Gary Busey, I found this pretty boring. I did like Dan putting the Camp David yarmulke on the front of his head. I thought that was a funny visual, but otherwise I just found it really plain. Like, everybody was playing straight man to Busey, which is fine because, good Lord, how can you not? Look at him. Him gulping the wine was getting me big laughs. I thought something was going to go down there with him putting back that red. Maybe that was just Gary being Gary. I don't know. But overall, it did not really work for me as a sketch. And sometimes I do still struggle with how current eventsy the show can be. And I mean, that's never going to go away. It's always just it's a current events show. So, we try to look at it from the differing perspective of today and yesteryear. But anyway, this boring politics stuff doesn't do it for me in these older SNLs. And this was no exception, again, with the exception of Gary Busey, who continued to really kind of carry the energy with his mania.
All right, so now we have Eubie Blake and Gregory Hines. So Eubie Blake, he debuted professionally in 1901 or 1902. He was playing piano at a bordello and later went to great acclaim as a dance club act, a vaudeville performer, recording artist, and composer. At this point in time, he's 92 years old and holds the distinction now of being the oldest person to have ever been in a feature role on the show. And just to put this in perspective, he's 20 years older than Ruth Gordon and Miskel Spillman were. The true pioneer of American music. At that time, he was in the pop culture zeitgeist because there was a Broadway show called Eubie, which had opened and to great acclaim and was getting ready for a national tour. Tonight, he's joined on stage by singer, actor, dancer Gregory Hines. Hines was best known for an innovative tap dancing style that, I don't know my tap dancing, but the experts say he kind of mimicked the sound of a drummer more than that of a traditional dancer. At the time, Hines was a member of the cast of Eubie, but he would go on to make slews of film and television appearances over the years. When I was a kid, I actually thought Gregory Hines was, I used to call him the most talented person on TV. I'm not sure I was wrong. But he was definitely the type of entertainer that's really few and far between in today's era. Before getting into the thing, are you guys familiar with either Eubie Blake or Gregory Hines?
I know Gregory Hines, just, famous song and dance man. And Eubie Blake, I recognize the name. I was like, where do I know the name Eubie Blake? It's from The Simpsons when Grandpa talks about having a crush on the world's oldest woman. The proof that he has is a picture of her delivering Eubie Blake. She lived to be 120 years old, she did. Here's a picture of her delivering Eubie Blake. So that's all I know about Eubie Blake. But It turns out I actually knew a couple of his songs. It's hilarious to think, well, I'll just say now, but Wild About Harry, which I know, and I'm sure most people know, is one of the songs Michigan J. Frog sang in the old Warner Brothers cartoon. And it's just insane to think that the man who wrote that old-timey ragtag thing that I picture being 100 and some years old was featured on a 1979 SNL. So it's pretty cool.
It must have been The Simpsons. I knew his name, and it must have been The Simpsons that I knew it from, because, that's an episode I would have seen a dozen times. But otherwise, I have no idea who this man is. I barely know who Gregory Hines is, but I knew who he was. And I've known who he was. I've known who he was for a long time. But I think it's probably just one of those things. Like, Gregory Hines was never in anything that I was the target audience for.
Sure.
So I just never, not that you have to be the target audience to enjoy something. I don't mean to imply that. I just mean that it just wasn't for me. And I thought he was an actor. I didn't realize until much later. He was a song and dance man.
So after some banter about the blues, where Blake jokingly accuses Hines of not knowing who he is, they go into the lowdown blues, which Hines really does an excellent job as. Hines thanks Blake for writing it, and Blake thanks Hines for singing it because of all the royalties he gets. They then go into I'm Just Simply Full of Jazz. This is more ragtime than the first one. Definitely more show-tuney than the first piece as well. Hines then goes into a tap dance lit only by a spotlight. This one it's a fun piece. It didn't have the power of the first one, but definitely augmented by Hines's dancing. The final piece is Blake's I'm Just Wild About Harry, which was written for the musical Shuffle Along. He begins it as a waltz, which he says is how he originally wrote it, and then goes into a ragtime version and tells Hines to sing it. I thought this was an excellent segment. Blake looked completely overjoyed to be there. Hines was absolutely excellent and felt like he was in the presence of a hero here. Now, the segment has far more of a PBS vibe than an SNL one, but I'm not complaining. The TV just, even at that point, wasn't doing that sort of thing too much anymore. To quote Jack Donaghy, I remember when Bravo used to air operas. But booking this sort of thing is definitely a gamble. I think it absolutely paid off here, and it really goes to show, like, television today can be really close-minded with its bookings. I don't think SNL would ever book a 90-year-old jazz man and a tap dancer today, and I think that's to their disservice. Thought this was just an excellent segment, top to bottom.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that 100%. Gregory Hines is so talented. Like, 3 very different songs, delivered them all perfectly, and the tap dance in the middle was, you can't really say much more about the guy as an entertainer than that. It was nice to see, Eubie actually up there doing it himself. Like you said, he looked to be having a good time. I'm sure it was good promotion for the musical as well. And yeah, like, I won't lie to you, the very first song, I was kind of like, okay, that's not really my thing. And then the last 2 picked up a little bit. But yeah, no, very interesting choice. It did go on long, but I'm sure some of that might also just be, you know what, we've got a 92-year-old man here. Let's not drag him out twice.
I didn't know what to expect. I thought the banter at the beginning was charming, but I mean, we're 3 for 3, lads. I was really blown away by Gregory Hines' performance to the point where I was ready to have his babies when all 3 of these numbers were done. I thought there was great chemistry between them. They seemed like they were having such a good time. And yeah, I not knowing what to expect, but being open-minded, I was honestly pretty blown away by the whole thing. This is not the kind of music that I sit around and listen to, but it doesn't have to be when the caliber of performance is this good. You just enjoy good shit for what it is. It's good shit. Good shit, pal. Man, Gregory Hines died in his 50s. What a sadness that is. And as we've been talking, I'm just kind of scrolling through his Google images here. He always seems to have a sadness in his eyes. I'm feeling bad for Gregory Hines right now.
Yeah, I don't know his story too much, but it was a natural causes death in his 50s, I believe, wasn't it?
Liver cancer.
Oh, boy. Yeah. One thing about the banter I really appreciated here, and maybe it's from watching too much Hee Haw the last little while, it felt like natural, like, what song do you want me to sing? Usually it's like Sure, Johnny, will you sing, I don't know, Ring of Fire? Yeah, this one felt legit like Gregory Hines could have said anything and Eubie Blake was going to play it, We're now off to Women's Problems, and this is a show about problems women face day to day, as hosted by and paneled by a group of chauvinist men. Dan, Bill, Garrett, and Gary play Steve, Brad, Mike, and Craig, respectively. So on the last episode, they were talking about women and their careers. And Bill says any woman who wants a career has two problems. First off, there's the career itself, and then there's the baby thing. He says there isn't a broad alive that doesn't feel fulfilled without a baby. Gary then wishes that women would just make up their mind. Bill then says if he wants a kid in his late 40s, he'll divorce his wife, marry abroad in his 20s, and he doesn't worry about that. Garrett says women should be hit if they mouth off to their men. The example he gives is in the rear end with a car antenna. Dan says a man can benefit by listening to what a woman wants. Garrett then mentions when women get old, they get awfully ugly, and who wants to be around that? Gary says when his wife is on her monthly cycle, he checks into a hotel and she calls him when it's over. They then go to the crowd for questions. Brian Doyle Murray as Vic wonders why no woman can climax. Busey says it depends on where the hot bone is located or if they even have one. John Belushi then comes as Clint and says it's great that this is the only show on TV that will discuss women's problem and thanks the men. He then asks what part of the woman's body they like best. I'll say breasts, except Garrett, who says butt, and he then refers again to hitting his wife with a car antenna. Dan wonders what actors they would like to sleep with. Everyone says Adrienne Barbeau, except Gary, who says Wonder Woman. The show is now over, and Dan says if everybody works together, there won't be a need for a show like this. Now, obviously, this is a terrible set of opinions by some very boorish fellows, but I get the vibe that the characters, especially Dan's character, seriously thought they were doing a service to society. The humor for me was in that ignorance and the ignorance of the studio audience. And, today it's definitely not so blatant, but there are still a lot of shows on TV where people are saying ridiculous things, not like this. And they have this captivated and devoted audience who are sycophantic like Belushi's character, or coming to them with real advice, for real advice like Brian Doyle Murray's character. While I didn't think this was excellent and I was probably cringing more than laughing, I got their point and I kind of enjoyed it.
I thought this was hilarious. Obviously knowing that it's the creeps who are being parodied here, not the actual women's problems. But I knew we were in for something the second they announced the panel on the women's problems sketch. Now, there were definitely some highlights here. The specificness of hitting your wife in the ass with a car antenna and the way Garrett delivered it just cracked me up. And then he returned to it. Yeah, like you said, there's lots of this that still goes on, like, men's rights, shit bags and all that. It's nonstop. It is a parody of them. And this is basically just Facebook comments, the sketch. And yeah, it's the fact that this still goes on and people still don't realize that they are the joke and not the other way around is excellent. I will say, though, for my little bit of male chauvinism, I will add that Adrienne Barbeau is a fine choice.
Pretty much with you guys, I think. Like, I didn't think the sketch was great or anything. Don't get me wrong. But I do see what they were trying to accomplish by having this women's rights show with these chauvinistic fellas. Like, okay, I get your setup. But I didn't really think there was a lot of jokes there, except for the antenna on the ass, which was a good joke. But man, I tell you, there's something about the personality of Gary Busey when he's sitting there. Just, it looks like he was wearing shorts. His pants right up so high on his legs, like his cuffs are coming up to his knees, and he's just sitting there. And he's raring to go at all times. It looks like he's just trying to like hold in this energy, like he just wants to get up and do that slap thing he did at the monologue on a whim. And anyway, I find his television presence magnetic. But otherwise, other than the antenna joke, I didn't really like the sketch. Like, I see what you're doing. Yeah. It's okay, great. Like Chili said it well. It's Facebook comments the sketch, and I don't read those either.
Couldn't help but wonder what television station somewhere in the States, some local station, had women's problems hosted by a man, though, legitimately.
Oh, it's definitely a Fox affiliate.
Weekend update. There's a picture of a small plane on top of a big plane, and Jane reports that as airplanes mate in mid-air. This one is brought to you by Chairman Meow. It's the Chinese food for cats, but the joke is overshadowed by Bill arriving late to the set just in the nick of time to great applause. Just a few jokes here. The Voyager probe shows images of Jupiter with a ring. Scientists determined that God was playing with a basketball and it got stuck in the hoop. A story about the seal hunt goes into great gruesome detail about the seals, but says it's marred by sadness because 3 hunters got injured. They mentioned last week I mentioned the Philadelphia clock being misspelled. Folks from Philly wrote in to say that Philadelphia was actually spelled Philadelphia. Philadelphia residents prefer the new spelling to the old spelling. Bill hands Jane's the earrings that she left in his apartment. They were found under a pillow by Lorraine. In the 1980s election, candidate Philip Crane is reported as having wanted to have sex with 1,000 women. Jane reports that the story was actually planted by Ronald Reagan, and an unreliable source told Weekend Update that Reagan has had sex with 1,000 men. There's a joke about freewheeling moles on an armed rampage after seeing the movie Warriors. Gets no reaction from the audience. The Shah is to be on trial for crimes against the nation. He's being tried in absentia. If he's convicted, he'll be shot in absentia, and a fake funeral will be held. Celebrity Corner. Mr. Ed has died, and his widow is there to speak. After a long tech error, we cut to Mrs. Ed, which is the large white horse from earlier, and this horse is wearing a black veil and will not stay in front of the camera or green screen and keeps wandering off its mark, and the cameras are following it as it kind of wanders around in circles in the studio. The horse is voiced by Gilda, and starts to say how much they loved each other. She and Mr. Ed were married for so long because he was so great in the hay. Because the horse is all over the place, Bill and Gilda have some fun with ad-libbing as the horse wanders. And then the horse says that Mr. Ed used to tell her that a corpse is a corpse, of course, of course. That's all I got for Weekend Update here. Little bits. The actual Mr. Ed died in 1970. Another horse named Pumpkin, who was kind of a stand-in for Mr. Ed and took the title of Mr. Ed, was the one that died in 1979. There was always confusion about that. The jokes on this were meh. There wasn't much to it, but the segment was made by Bill's arriving late and, of course, the horse wandering all over the place and Bill and Gilda's ad-libbing. And, of course, at the end of Weekend Update, Jane completely breaks character and just can't keep it in. She's laughing about the horse. I really think if that horse had been well-behaved, this would have been one of the worst Weekend Updates I've seen in a while. You know, don't work with children or animals, because that horse walked away with this show.
Yeah, that horse bit was one of my favorite things I think I've ever seen on SNL. I cannot stop laughing. Even just the fact that they had a horse wearing a veil in and of itself was funny. Bill had some great ad-libbing while they were getting ready for the horse to appear on the screen. And then once the horse is on there, it was just ran away with it. Great in the hay, great line. And even just when Gilda starts saying, yeah, whoa, where am I going? Like, I don't know, that horse was fantastic. I loved it. Yeah, some of the jokes in the actual update were all right. I enjoyed the seal hunt joke, but yeah, no, the horse 100% won my heart.
I don't really have anything to add to what you guys said. You summed it up quite succinctly. You know, without the antics, what do you got? A really dreadful Weekend Update with barely any jokes in it. Like, as I try to remove those things, you know, pretending that everything just went smoothly and right, what the hell were they thinking with this Weekend Update? It was really dull outside of the anything can happen on live television antics, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoy thoroughly. You know, what a poor writing job for this one.
Next up is Unsung Heroes of Rock and Roll. So we have a crawl come up, and there's a bunch of lines that use the term average and typical many times, and they talk about how teenagers had yet to shake their hips. And we go to a 1950s school gym as a rock band fronted by Gary Busey called Sonny Dacey and the Firecrackers. They take a break. Jane goes up on stage as Miss Hinks, the health teacher, and she reminds folks that she'll be teaching the cha-cha tomorrow. She's very glad that everyone is well behaved and wearing the correct clothes. This is a 1950s high school sock hop or dance. Miss Hinks says that one person has put cellophane on the toilets in the girls' room, and because of that, there will be no Eskimo pies. Dan, as the principal, Mr. Moby, takes the microphone and says he was against having live music, but he's impressed by the behavior of the students, and he reminds kids to behave within the limits. Gilda plays the school easy girl named Carla. She comes to Mrs. Hinks to ask for advice about a friend of hers who is late. Mrs. Hinks doesn't catch on to her meaning. Carla winds up getting no help at all. Bill, playing Greg, a fellow student, offers to take Carla out to the phone booth so they can get something straight between them. Lorraine, as Carol, approaches Busey and says that she's a big fan and is a songwriter and would like him to hear some of her music. She introduces him to Henry Jackson, played by Garrett, who's her partner that she met singing on the street. She would like Busey to hear some of her songs. He gives her the key to his hotel room and tells her that if she comes to his hotel room, they can make a record. She's delighted. She hugs him and then realizes that her stuffed chest has come uneven. Carla and Greg then return from the phone booth and they spike the punch as Principal Moby warns them that chewing gum and slow dancing can lead to drinking beer. Belushi, as a member of the band, invites Carla out to his car. Carol approaches Busey, and her mother won't let her go to Sonny's hotel room, so she's given the key to Garrett. Sonny, Busey, says that Garrett can't come because it's a segregated hotel. So Lorraine and Garrett go up on stage to sing their song. After they've finished and people clap, the band goes back up, and Belushi introduces Carla as a nympho to Sonny. Sonny gives her the key, and Carla dares the band to play some rock and roll. They go into a song, and they're interrupted by Mosby. He then goes on about how rock music is disgusting and un-American and un-Christian, and he gives this wonderful over-the-top speech about how bad rock is because it leads to dungarees, interracial dating, and beer. He then tells everyone to line up in alphabetical order, and they're going to be suspended for a month. Sonny tells the principal that it isn't going to be that easy to stop Sonny Dacey and the Firecrackers. A chorale then comes up to say that it was easy to stop them because a few moments later, the group were rendered deaf by an exploding boiler and never played again. This was a huge sketch. This was a really big sketch. It had some very intricate blocking and some camera work for this live bit. There were some funny bits here and there. It was definitely a huge dose of 50s nostalgia that harkened nicely to the Buddy Holly story and even Lorraine's role in American Hot Wax. And it foreshadows things like Footloose. The final crawl caught me off guard, and it was really funny. I did hope for a more in-depth musical performance. Like Busey was on guitar and Schaefer was with bass. Belushi was on drums. I couldn't tell who the fourth member was, but I think it was either Don Novello or Howard Shore. But either way, this was far bigger and more bloated than it had to be. That being said, everyone looked like they were having a fun time doing it, and it was all hands in, but there was just maybe too many cliched stories in one chunk here. I also wondered, did Busey's character have a black eye in this, or did Busey himself have a black eye? It sure looked like it. I think it was maybe too big for its britches, maybe.
It was kind of long. Yeah, not really much to say about it. I can't remember any specific jokes that really caught me off guard. It was well done. And like I said, people seemed to be enjoying themselves. It was well done, but just not funny. I didn't mind watching it. I was just waiting for something to happen, and it never really did.
Very ambitious indeed. It's interesting that you noted, Keith, the blocking, because I noticed there was some very interesting shots of them like talking behind other people and the camera kind of tracking their movements appropriately. And I did appreciate that. I like a ambitious production. I just wish it was a little funnier. And you know me, and the thousands know that I do not care for the 1950s. I have no sense or no affinity for 50s nostalgia whatsoever. I've bitched about it before, but I have to remind myself, hey, if they did do this today, it's a 90s dance. And that reminds me how close to death I am, how grim. Gary Busey continues to do a good job and really be himself despite playing characters, which I think is admirable.
We're now off to Schiller's Reel, and this one is called Perchance to Dream, and it's Bill Murray's honker character, and he's kind of roaming the streets. Actually, he's on the streets drinking outside a stage door, and he's yelling at nobody about being bad and saying that he'll be a collect call because if you call him, you'll have to pay for it. He sees a bottle of alcohol on the ground and he drinks it, and his reaction is voiced over. He's saying it's not too shabby. And he goes into a dream state where he's playing a character who's performing in an Elizabethan play. Kind of turns out to be a pastiche of a lot of Shakespeare's most famous lines. He does it excellently, and the crowd cheers, and his fellow actors look on with reverence. And he's mobbed afterwards. He's mobbed by his fellow actors, and he's kissed by a woman. And he wakes up on the street to realize that he's been kissing the end of a cop's nightstick. The cop is kicking him out of the area, and Honker goes to leave only to see a rose on the ground. He says, "Oh, it's a rose. What if they didn't call it that? It'd still be just as beautiful." I thought this was an excellent short film. Bill Murray does a fantastic job right here. Like, within the context of Saturday Night Live, I definitely preferred, like, Belushi's Look Back in Anger and Gilda's Dolce Gilda. This one could stand alone away from the show better than the others. I thought it was just a really excellent, like, art film. It wasn't the biggest for laughs, if that's what you want. It was still funny, and it was really, really good. I'm really enjoying these Schiller reels.
I disagree completely. For me, this was just not my cup of tea. I don't know. I just don't really get it. It struck me as being, it was just back to being the very early SNL stuff. I didn't find it funny. I felt it was a little too pretentious, and it just reminded me a bit of, I know it was meant as a joke, obviously, but it just reminded me as, like, when going back to The Simpsons, like, Barney's movie about "Don't cry for me, I'm already dead." It was just that, and I don't know. "Oh, the poor drunk has a dream" in black and white. For me, this did not work at all.
All right, tiebreaker. I really liked it. I thought it was, like Chili said, it was very early season, early series SNL. It was, it did have that kind of throwback vibe. Keith, you and I are sometimes, I would argue, that we have an advantage of just watching these in a row so much that we are very trained to sort of almost know what's coming a little bit. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, as soon as this started, I knew it wasn't supposed to just make me laugh.
Yeah.
My brain kind of says, okay, this is a Schiller reel. I can tell where it's going right away. Or I shouldn't say I can tell where it's going, but I know how to feel. So I didn't, like, when we went into the 50s sketch, I was like, okay, where's the laughs? I didn't go into this saying, where's the laughs? I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sit back and, it's late in the show. It's a Schiller reel. Going to not try to judge it as a ha-ha comedy. And I didn't, and I enjoyed it. But I mean, everything Chili said, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but everything Chili said is right. It was a little pretentious. It was very artsy. It was very, "Don't cry for me, I'm already dead." But I had an opposite emotional reaction. But I will take man getting hit in groin with football any day of the week as well.
Absolutely. Our next bit is Muckjumpers. So we go to Kansas in 1937. Dan and Lorraine play a Southern father and daughter who sit on the front porch of their home on a hot Southern day. Garrett comes in as a neighbor to say that there's a slop jockey in town. Dan refers to the slop jockey as a muck jumper. He says he hasn't seen one in a long time, but Garrett points out that they like the heat. Lorraine doesn't even know what they are, and she asks, and Dan says they no earthly good, and he tells Lorraine if she sees a muck jumper come by to give it water and send it on its way. John and Bill enter as Dan's sons. They say the cow is stuck in the mud and they can't rescue it. They just want to leave it there because it's easier. Dan gets mad at them and says they don't have enough ambition. He tells Garrett, whose name was Perseus, I think, to get a rope, a baseball bat, and to hitch up the team. Busey then enters as a traveler and asks if he can sit and rest. Turns out he is the muck jumper, and Lorraine says that she's to give him water and be cordial and send him on his way. Lorraine then gives a ladle of water, and he is very attracted to her, and he starts reciting poetry. John and Bill wonder exactly what a muck jumper does. He says that he tries to enjoy the finer things in life, but they wonder what the job actually is. He says for 85 cents he'll jump in their cesspool with his clothes on, or for 40 cents he'll jump into the pig trough. Bill and John wonder if it's sort of ritual thing for good luck. He says no, it's not that. It's just how he makes his living. John and Bill think this is funny, and they pool their money together despite Lorraine's protests. and they give him money to go jump in the pig trough. Busey leaves. They follow him off out back, I guess, and we can hear them laughing. Busey then re-enters covered in mud or perhaps feces, and he sits on the step. They wonder how he can make ends meet with 45 cents, and he says, well, it's 45 cents for him to jump in and $40 to move on. So first off, holy cue cards during the poetry, Gary. It's the most blatant cue card reading I've ever seen. Even Frank Zappa couldn't do that. But I thought this was a great sketch. There was a bit of a slow build here. This really, in a way, had a vibe of a campfire skit that had a few laughs, but then this big, huge punchline at the end. Everyone was good. The production was good on this one. I really loved this, even though there was only one really big laugh at the end. There was enough throughout that I really enjoyed it. So this was great. I was really happy.
Yeah, I found this a little bit slow. It did have some highlights in it. Like you said, it was a one joke sketch, but it did keep me pretty intrigued. Actually, no, I'll say it's a two joke sketch. Obviously, the main one at the end about the extra money to move on. Even I liked the earnestness with how Gary just said, like, oh yeah, for this much money, I'll jump in your cesspool, and for this much money, I'll jump in your pig trough. He didn't necessarily seem ashamed of it. It's what his daddy did. It's what his daddy did before him. Yeah, overall, this is more on the positive than the negative. I don't know. Maybe they could have sprinkled a little bit more in.
Didn't do it for me, fellas. One thing that I don't like, as well as 50s nostalgia, is country bumpkins. I do not like the setting, the character, the aesthetic. I don't like country bumpkin type stuff. So to see these, southern guys with their hog farm, it already just turns me off. And I'm not trying to say that these things or settings can't be funny. Obviously, creativity and imagination is a wonderful thing. You can have the scariest of movies, the funniest of movies, the funniest of stories with these aesthetics and these characters. But it just doesn't generally pan out that way. When you start, that would be the exception to the rule. When you start with something like a 50s nostalgia or a country bumpkin, I think you just kind of set yourself up to go in that direction, which is fine. But Matthew doesn't have to like it, and Matthew doesn't. And, them counting the change, and I thought it was kind of cute. And then he goes back, and comes back with the mud all over him. I had a sensible chuckle. But overall, this really just sank for me. I did not like it. I did not find it funny. I didn't laugh at the end. I was a bit sour, actually, the whole time.
We then go to a really short segment where Gary Busey just says, this show is out of control, but stay tuned. And then he makes this weird face at the camera. Anything about that? That was just bizarre.
I thought they were going into the closing, and then, no, we got more left. All right.
Yeah, we're a little short. Gary, go say something.
Next up is Stay All Night. It's a Bob Willis and Tommy Duncan. It's an up-tempo country song. It's been covered by many people. The only one I'd ever heard before this was Willie Nelson, I think, did a version. It's got Gary Busey on guitar, and he introduces his band, which features the band's Rick Danko on violin and their fiddle, and Paul Butterfield on harmonica. They do this high-energy, modern, perhaps up-tempo spin on the song, with backing from the SNL band. The audio did this no favors. I found this very hard to make out. It was too loud or something, but they definitely had tons of energy. They were definitely enjoying themselves. Something was off.
Yeah, as much as I'm a fan of Gary Busey, I've seen a few things of his forays into music, and it's just not my style. Clearly, I'd say this is since this is coming off the back of the Buddy Holly story, he is probably seen as, who's this young guy who did such a good job playing this musician. Let's have him do some music. And, Gary did, obviously he was in bands and he was a musician himself, but yeah, no, not my type of music, not something I'd really care to see again.
You're sure right about the sound problem. It was really garbled, and it had like a too loud tone to it that it made little things hard to distinguish. But I also thought like the energy was off the chart. Gary Busey is having a fantastic time. The musicians seem to be having a fantastic time, and they're playing loud and they're being raucous. You know what? I'm going to say it. This was quite punk rock, and I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing him go out there and just fucking mangle this song. with these guys, and because I've said it a couple of times this episode. Sometimes if the material isn't there, or if there is something lacking, if you give a wild enough performance, you're gonna carry it, and I think he did for me.
We now go to the good nights. Busey says, "We got to go. We had a good time." And then he dumps a bottle of water all over himself. Busey's chaos, he continues after the good nights. He's running around the stage like a madman. Garrett and Jane are dancing with each other. It just looks like a happy festive party up on that stage after this show. So let's rate this show. Gary Busey is an absolute madman in this episode. He's all over the place. He's ad-libbing and making weird noises at times. He's relying on the cue cards at others. But even then, I don't know what else anyone would expect with an episode of this show hosted by Gary Busey. His energy was alive, and even in the longer, perhaps slower sections of the episode, his energy was still there, and the pieces just weren't, they might have been long, but they didn't necessarily feel long. He did an excellent job as Billy Carter. He was around long enough to have made a real mark as a host, and I've enjoyed following his career and his life, so it's really hard for me to hate this. Was he a well-disciplined host who brought up the quality of every sketch? Not really, but his unpredictable energy kind of had me on the edge of my seat. And it really brought back memories from season 1 where the show wasn't this perfectly polished television show. It brought back some of the rawness. He's still out there. I would love to see Gary Busey host again. It's not going to happen, but I would love to see them. I would love to see them book him next year. Thumbs up for me as a host on a different scale than I probably put most hosts.
Yeah, similar to what I said at the beginning, like, a lot of times the issue seems to be the host doesn't feel comfortable. At times, Gary felt too comfortable, which is better than the other option. He didn't mind stepping in here or there, and while it sometimes affected the flow of the sketch, being a Busey fan, I didn't mind it. It's great to see a young and still, quote unquote, with it Gary Busey. For as much as we talked about, he is a wild man, like he was, bounding full of energy, which is great. This guy nominated for an Oscar at the time. At times, it's kind of sad to see, especially, his drug issues, his overdose, the brain injury from the motorcycle accident. In a way, it's kind of sad these days to see, somebody who had so much talent, so much energy be reduced to a punchline is like, hey, it's the crazy guy, but I'm happy to see a young Gary Busey in just about anything. It wasn't the perfect host, but if you like Gary Busey for the right reasons, I guess I'll say, this is as good a thing as you can watch as any.
I thought Gary Busey was fantastic. Brought an energy that was desperately needed to this episode in particular. He's just super charismatic. I think he's what you want out of a host, maybe what I want out of a host, in that he's around a lot. And he seems to work very well with the cast, but he doesn't necessarily disappear into the cast or into the show. He is still very obviously a bit the odd person out. And I'm not trying to say the star of the show, but like I can't find the word right now. But anyway, he highlights himself rather than just disappearing so much into the show, which some hosts can do very effectively. Don't get me wrong, no disrespect to Buck Henry, but I also think it's valuable to have this type of host that just comes out and is like, this is my fucking show now, and just has fun with it and has a good time, which he clearly did. And because of that, I did too.
The music. So this is a tale of two performances. We have Eubie Blake and Gregory Hines doing something that you could very easily have seen, on the stages of Carnegie Hall. And then you have Gary Busey, which is basically your wacky uncle's cover band. One was polished and slick, the other a complete mess, both high energy and a lot of fun. I preferred the Blake and Hines. There's not even a real comparison here, but there was definitely some cachet in seeing Busey, Danko, and Butterfield together. Even if the audio was a mess and the performance was rough around the edges, you couldn't deny the energy.
Yeah, we'll take them as two separates. For as good a job as I think Gary did, I didn't care for the musical number. Some of it's obviously the audio, but the actual song itself and all that, not really for me. But yeah, as far as Gregory Hines and Eubie Blake, I can't say it's one of my favorite musical performances I've seen on the show. It was great. It had 3 different songs, lots of variety, and Hines' tap dancing was just really something to see. Yeah, that gets top notch for me.
I am in agreement. I thought the music tonight was excellent. I definitely enjoyed the final performance with Busey way more than you guys did, which is fine because you guys know how I have suffered with the music over the run of this public service to the thousands. Sometimes it has been excruciating for me. So it's nice for me to like things. And yeah, they're two very completely opposite beasts. And obviously the first one is better. I mean, come on. I'd let Gregory knock me up.
What was the worst sketch of the night, fellas?
For me, this is a no-brainer. Worst sketch of the night. The short film, the Bill Murray, Don't Cry For Me, I'm Already Dead sketch. No time or patience for it.
I would have been absolutely shocked if you said anything other than that. Yeah, you really hated that. I didn't like that, the Country Bumpkin sketch. That was my least favorite. With the 85 cents to go in the mud, $40 to go away. That one didn't do anything for me. I thought it was Busey's least effective performance of the evening. As I already said, on a personal level, I don't like Country Bumpkin stuff.
And I went with the Unsung Heroes of Rock and Roll. I just thought it was fun, but it was too big in scope, and a lot got lost. Ambitious, blocked well, done well, costumed well, but I didn't laugh much. It was kind of too many cliches at once, I think. What was your favorite sketch of the night?
This may be the first time I've ever given my favorite sketch of the night to Weekend Update, and it wins by one horse length. That horse was one of my favorite things I may have seen. Like, I was making supper while watching and listening to it, and I was laughing out loud. I had to stop everything I was doing and just to pay more attention to it. Great ad-libbing by Bill and by Gilda. Aside from the horse, you can eliminate Weekend Update, but since that's what was there, Weekend Update for the first time, I believe, from me anyway, is getting sketch of the night.
Wow, Chili, I hotly disagree with that, like pretty passionately, but I'll leave it for now. I didn't like a lot of the sketches tonight. It's weird because, I didn't feel like this was like a really terrible episode. But again, it's because Gary Busey was just running all over the place being himself. And it really buoyed the show in a way that I think would have been a fucking disaster without him. I'm going to give, despite the absence of Busey, my sketch of the night also to a bit of an outlier, but I really feel I have no recourse. I'm going to give it to the Schiller's Reel with Bill Murray that I enjoyed watching and I'd sit through again. I really thought Bill Murray got to show what we're going to see a bit later from his more professional acting.
I agree, but I've also opted this season to not include my short movies. This is just my own choice. I think Schiller's Reel was the best part of the night, but sketch-wise, Matt, I'm going with Muckjumpers. It was well structured, well performed. Set was great. I actually wrote here, they don't do this sort of Southern stuff enough.
You son of a bitch.
And especially not doing the hee-haw spin-off.
No, especially where these people aren't made to look like idiots. Sure, John and Bill were, but there was some intelligence elsewhere. This will not be a top sketch of the year for me. The sketches were weak tonight, though the performances were pretty good. But I think I'm going to remember Muckjumpers for a very long time. So who's the star of the night? Chili, it can't be a horse.
Okay, no, star of the night, and this may be, a bit of a surprise considering how much I hated one of the things he did, but Bill Murray gets star of the night from me. I'll put it this way. The problem with that short film was not Bill's performance. It was just the thing itself. He was a lot of fun in a lot of things tonight. Liked his improv and his work on Update with the horse. So the horse gets an assist, but also good update. He was really good in the rock and roll sketch, really funny. Probably the highlight in the women's problem sketch as well. So Bill did a lot of good stuff.
2 for 3 so far. I think Bill Murray was the star of the evening as well. I did like the Schiller Reel much more than Chili, of course, but I also thought he was exemplary everywhere else he was.
Yeah, it's 3 for 3 here. This is a sweep for Bill Murray. It came down to either Dan Aykroyd or Bill Murray for me, but I had to go with Bill. He was just everywhere, and he was really good in everything. I enjoyed the Schiller reel, his ad-libbing, his goofiness on being late for update, his hillbilly brother. It was just really good performances by him tonight. So overall, I don't know if it's my interest in Gary Busey's career, my admiration for just wacky performances or whatever, but this was kind of a hit for me. But I'm not totally delusional, and I can say that this was not one of the greatest episodes. The sketches were fun and performances were good. There wasn't much in the way of belly laughs. A lot of happy smiles. I do expect some laughter in this and not to just be amused throughout. And we got some funny things in some sketches. We got some smart things in some sketches, but a lot of the time, nothing. There was no point, I don't think, where everything was there all at once. Eubie, Blake, and Gregory Hines were great. The Busey musical bit was unique, different, and fun to see. But I'm noticing, and I'm continuing to notice that in season 4, there's a lot of long sketches. I don't mind when they can keep the momentum moving, but they're about 50-50 for that tonight. Cold open was good. Monologue was very Busey. And updates only laughs were really the mess-ups. They were great mess-ups, but they were still mess-ups. So I'm going 6.5 out of enjoyment, which I don't know if that's too high or too low, but it was kind of, this episode was a mishmash of things that worked to varying degrees. No definite hits and no definite misses for me. So 6.5 seemed like a fair grade based on what I've given other things this season.
I'm going slightly higher. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. To be honest with you, the writing really let the show down. They didn't, a lot of sketches we talked about just did not have a whole lot of jokes in them. Even some things that may or may not have worked, like say the slop jockey sketch. It was well directed, like the costuming was all there, like the sets were all great. But the fact that it's live TV is what saved this. In the fact that a fantastic musical performance from Hines and from Blake, kind of the what's going to happen next energy of Gary Busey, and the nice surprise for me of a horse going into business for himself, brother. So if you've got those three things, an interesting host, I'm a fan. I understand that most non-Busey fans obviously will not appreciate this episode as much as the three of us do, but it had one of my favorite musical performances, a host that kept me very interested, and one of the bits I laughed the most at in all of SNL. I wish I could give this a higher thing, but the writing docked 3 points, so 7 out of 10.
I wonder if I'm thinking about this too academically, because I think you guys are being just too nice to this show right now. You take Gary Busey out of this episode, and it is a effing disaster from top to bottom. I really think the host carried this all the way. Yes, there was a great musical number, but that's such an outlier. And so often the music just stinks. And it's often like a little, I know for sure that some people take the musical performances on SNL as a piss break or a smoke break, and then they come back for Weekend Update or whatever. So it's almost like its own little universe. But I definitely find you guys' score pretty high. I liked the cold open okay, despite having the host in it. I don't love that. The monologue did make me laugh for what it was. The sketches across the board were pretty dull, really only carried by Busey's livelihood. Chili, the reason I think I was like, wow, I really disagree with Chili here is because it was one of the worst Weekend Updates I ever sat through. And it was only funny because of a screw up. And so that's why I was like, best sketch of the night. Come on. Schiller's reel, which I liked a lot more. God, there was something else that I didn't. God, the country bumpkin sketch really bugged me. So I think you have a really awful episode with a really good host. Gary Busey's not going to give a shit what I rate this episode. I'll high five him when I see him. But I would give this episode 4.5.
So we've got Matt's 4.5, Chili's 7, my 6.5. That averages out of the 6. The IMDb users gave this a 7. They ranked this as 14th of the season, 14 out of 20. So that kind of jives, I think, with where we're all sitting in some ways. It definitely wasn't one of the top, but and I agree. I think we all agree that, Gary Busey as a host buoyed this big time, because this would have absolutely been in the toilet if it wasn't for Gary Busey and a wandering horse. So, Chili, it's been too long since we've seen you last, and we're going to see you one more time before season 4 ends.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I look forward to it.
So, Matt, do you know who we have next week?
Lay it on me, please.
Margot Kidder and the Chieftains.
Well, I like Margot Kidder.
This might be one.
And a zebra.
So, are you excited for Margot Kidder and the Chieftains, Matt?
I like Margot Kidder. I think Margot Kidder's a fantastic actress. She's been in some of my favorite films, of course, from the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
I can't stand the Chieftains, but I'll do it for you, buddy.
Well, thanks very much. Matt and I will be back in about a week, but until then, we'll be muck jumping and slop jockeying here in SNHell.